Now, this Friday night, just gone 6:30, we have huge breaking news here at Sky Sports News, because following a hearing of UEFA on the 22nd of January, that was the date, the 22nd of January, Manchester City are to be punished for breaking financial rules in football, and they have been banned from all UEFA competition, whether it's that's Champions League or whether it's Europa League, for the 2 seasons after this one, for the seasons 2021 and 2022. The 2 seasons after this one finishes, Manchester City cannot take part in any European football. And Bella, they've also been hit in the pocket to the tune of 30 million euros.
Yeah, and we have just received a statement just into us from Manchester City. This is what it says. Manchester City is disappointed but not surprised by today's announcement by the UEFA Adjudicator Chamber. The club has always anticipated the ultimate need to seek out an independent body and process to impartially consider the comprehensive body of irrefutable evidence in support of its position. In December 2018, UEFA chief investigator publicly previewed the outcome and sanction that he intended to be delivered to Manchester City. And that was before any investigation had ever begun. The subsequent flawed and consistently leaked UEFA process he oversaw has meant that there was little doubt in the result that he would deliver. It goes on to say the club has formally complained to the UEFA disciplinary body, a complaint which was validated by a CAS ruling. That's the Court of Arbitration for Sport. So simply put, this is a case initiated by UEFA, prosecuted by UEFA, judged by UEFA. With this prejudicial process now over, the club will pursue an impartial judgment as quickly as possible and will therefore, in the first instance, commence proceedings with the Court of Arbitration for Sport at the earliest opportunity. That statement just into us from Manchester City.
So when we break all this down, this is what has happened in the last few moments. This is massive news with huge implication for that man, Pep Guardiola, who, after all, was brought to Manchester City, amongst other things, to attempt to win the Champions League. Now, City are going to try and do that this season. If they don't do it this season, they will not have the chance to do it for the following 2 seasons. And that itself opens up big questions. It poses big questions tonight as to whether or not Pep Guardiola will stay at Manchester City for the following 2 seasons after this one. So, Bella, as you rightly said there, and you've given Manchester City's side of it, their reaction to it tonight, it all boils down to this. Because of a breach of financial rules, Manchester City can forget it. At the end of this season, they will not be able to play in Europe, whether it's a Champions League or whether it's a Europa League in Europe, for the following 2 seasons at the end of this one. And as I said, it poses a very big question mark as to whether or not Guardiola, who was brought here to win, amongst other things, the Champions League, whether or not he would now stay beyond the end of this season. They've also been hit in the pocket tonight to the tune of £27 million, 30 million euros to be precise. So a massive, massive penalty thrown in the direction of Manchester City tonight. More reaction to this news as we get it. Massive, massive breaking news, and it affects one of England's biggest clubs, Manchester City. We have just heard from UEFA tonight that UEFA has decided, after a meeting on the 22nd of January, that Manchester City are to be hit and hit hard for breaking financial rules, that they, at the end of this season, will sit it out for the next 2 seasons in all European competition. Banned from Europe for the following 2 seasons at the end of this one, whether that is Champions League football, of course, or Europa League football as well. And, of course, it poses huge questions now over the future of Pep Guardiola. In other words, with that in mind, will he stay longer at Manchester City now that this has happened? City have also been hit hard in the pocket tonight, fined 30 million euros, around £27 million. All sorts of ramifications to this. My colleague Ben Ransom up in the northwest joins us live tonight. Ben, what's your take on this?
Well, look, Jim, first of all, it's absolutely massive news, isn't it, for Manchester City? Because, as you've been saying already, this, for the club, is massive. The owners, when they came in, one of their key fundamental aims in taking over Manchester City was ultimately to compete with Europe's biggest clubs and to win the Champions League. It's a little secret that Pep Guardiola was brought in for exactly that purpose, to attempt to win the Champions League. They've got this huge tie against Real Madrid in the knockout stages coming up in just over a week's time. So, look, I mean, in that respect, it couldn't be any bigger. UEFA have made a massive statement tonight as this investigation has gone on, because you can't forget the fact that this came from those Der Spiegel accusations back, I mean, we're rewinding 3 years now, aren't we? So it's been going on a long time. And Manchester City have always been unhappy at how Der Spiegel, in theory, got their information and the allegations that were levelled at their door. They said it was obviously by the illegal getting of emails and obtaining of that information. Manchester City have constantly denied any wrongdoing. But UEFA have decided tonight, obviously, to take a stand, to make an example of them. And that certainly is the way it appears, given such a strong punishment. 2 years outside the Champions League. Think of the amount of revenue and how damaging potentially that could be to a club like Manchester City, as well as a €30 million fine. So I think immediately you can tell from Manchester City's response that they're going to refer this straight away to the Court of Arbitration for Sport. They feel very unhappy with the verdict. Let's not forget, it was only this week that we heard the details come out from their initial application to the Court of Arbitration to Sport to have this investigation thrown out. Now, they were unhappy, it turns out, at the leaks, or the apparent leaks to the media about this whole process as it's been ongoing. City always felt confident that actually they would come out on top in this legal dispute. But UEFA have come down the other way. Manchester City clearly tonight very shocked and very unhappy.
And you're in and out of Manchester City all the time. You speak to Manchester City fans all the time. What do you think their take will be on the situation with Pep Guardiola very much in mind? Do you think this is now long-term going to make him think, well, do I stay, do I go at the end of this season?
I think he wouldn't be human if he wasn't considering that. I mean, most of our initial reaction when you're facing something like that, when your club is apparently under attack, is for everyone to kind of batten down the hatches and to kind of come together as one. I'm sure his instant reaction will be a thought of wanting to be part of Manchester City and to kind of stand with them. As far as the fans are concerned, I think it's no secret they've had a very difficult relationship with UEFA. It all stems, it goes back a long way. You'll know, of course, they have booed the Champions League anthem for many seasons now. They don't necessarily embrace the competition because of that relationship with UEFA. Although I have to say, this season that has started to just kind of they've had almost a warming up to the Champions League and to everything it offers. I think Pep Guardiola's come out a couple of times and called on the fans to really embrace the competition, and they've started to do that. So, I mean, as far as that respect, I can imagine Manchester City fans seeing this news tonight. They will be talking to each other. They will just be saying, this is typical of UEFA. They're making an example out of us. They're punishing us. They don't punish other clubs as they do for Manchester City. And that fractious relationship, you can imagine now, will go even further away. I mean, look, they'll be deeply unhappy. I think really with Pep Guardiola's future, it's too early to say for certain what he'll be thinking right now. I think he'll be very upset because in the short term, potentially, it means that he won't be able to compete and try and win that elusive Champions League for Manchester City in the next 2 seasons, should he stay that long. I think from his point of view now, it'll be about considering the facts. It'll be obviously about going as far as they can in the competition this season, because that's the biggest trophy they're still competing for, given Liverpool's dominance in the Premier League.
Okay.
And I just think, just finally on that, with Pep Guardiola, I think that a lot will depend on the appeal and what Manchester City get back from the Court of Arbitration for Sport.
OK, Ben, thank you very much indeed. Ben Ransom reacting to the news tonight that come the end of this season, regardless what happens in the Champions League for Manchester City, they sit it out in Europe for the next 2 seasons, banned from Europe for the next 2 seasons beyond this one for breaking financial rules. And they've also been hit hard in the pocket tonight, fined €30 million. More reaction coming next.